All right, hello and welcome to this video. This is part two of a beginner's guide to last Epoch. In the first part, we covered the classes, we covered some just basic understanding of the game, and we covered the skill trees. So in this particular guide, we are going to cover the two endgame mechanics, the two endgame systems that are in this game. We're going to cover the attributes or the stat sheet, this one right here. Now, if you watched part one, you already probably noticed that this one is a little bit different in format. The first one was pretty heavily scripted, uh, allowed me to kind of say exactly what I want as I wanted to, make sure everything was exactly right. And this one's going to be a little bit more conversational in approach. The reason for that is because there's a lot to cover here. This guide's almost going to be, almost definitely going to be a lot longer than the first one. There's also a whole lot more meat in this particular guide. So I'll try to go through stuff pretty quickly, but I also want to make sure that you as the viewer can really understand what I'm talking about. You may also have noticed if you watched part one that two of the areas I had intended on talking about in part two I haven't mentioned yet. That's being itemization for gear and the crafting system. And the reason for that is because, well, this guide has gone a little bit longer than I expected to. And so I'm going to do a part three. And in part three, we're going to talk about the itemization and the crafting. So I would have rather just cut this down and done it as a smaller video. But the reality is, I think everything I talk about in here is pretty valuable for a new player. So I think by dividing it into three parts instead of two allows you to decide what parts are important to you and what parts aren't. And so you can just skip ahead if you feel like some of this stuff doesn't apply to you or just isn't the kind of detail that you're looking for. Or maybe you need to, look into the crafting system. And that's really you're really struggling. So you can just move on to part three and kind of handle that as you wish. So that's how we're going to do it. All right, so let's start with the end game mechanics. So there are two currently in the game. That's not always going to be the case, and depending on when you're watching this, it may already be the case that there are more. But these are the two we have right now. Now, the first one is this right here. It's called the Monolith of Fate. Now, the Monolith of Fate is a system that's kind of like Rifting in Diablo 3, a little bit. It's also a little bit like Mapping in Path of Exile. So how this one works is you go in here and you choose what's called a timeline. And when you choose a timeline, you get these modifiers. So for this one in particular, you will have rare enemies have higher speed and crit chance until approached. So you have to actually go up to them and then they stop having those particular buffs. But this one here, rare enemies have 100% increased health. So you choose between these two, or you can re-roll and get some new ones like this. You get the new ones, but you can only re-roll once, and then once you've done that, you have to choose between these two. You choose one of them. So like I choose this one here, and I start. And when I do that, I'll get in this case I'll get enemies deal 25% increased damage, but I also get 15% increased item rarity and 7% increased experience gain. So when I go in there, I'll have a harder dungeon, but I'll get more benefits. Now these over time will start to stack on each other, so you get higher and higher benefits the more you go in there, the more you do without dying. So eventually you can get to some really high modifiers but also some really high benefits. So that's how this system works. It's a pretty cool system, and when you go into the map there'll be some objective to reach. And when you reach that, it'll be like either like a box to hit that starts waves of mobs. You kill the waves of mobs and you win, or it'll be a monster that you go and you kill that boss type monster, and then you win that way. And then you can come back out, get your rewards, and could rinse and repeat the process. So that's the first end game mechanic. It's a really cool one. The second one's the arena. Now to do the arena, you have to get a key from the Monolith of Fate. You'll get a key guaranteed every 5 monoliths you do, and then after the 5th monolith that you do, there's a I think it's a 5% chance that a key will drop from any of the other ones. So like 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 monoliths, all of those, you will get a key guaranteed. But like 6, 7, 13, 14, 18, so on and so forth, those ones each have a 5% chance of dropping an additional key. So that's how you get keys to the arena. The arena is over here. Should rush our way over. It's right here. And so to do the arena, you click on this, and you put a key in. I don't know if I have a key in my inventory now. I don't have a key, but if I had a key in here, I'd pop the key in here, I'd enter the arena, and then I'd do the arena. And there should be some footage on the screen to show you what the arena looks like. It's basically just endless waves of monsters. You do 5 waves at a time. You kill 5 waves of monsters. It stops, it gives you rewards, and then you can choose to either continue on and do more waves, or you can stop and get your rewards. The higher you go, the harder the waves get, but the better your rewards are. So kind of similar to Monolith of Fate in some ways, except it's not these very specific modifiers you choose. It's just the enemies get harder and your rewards get better. So it's a little bit more of a flat increase from the enemies, and there's less variety for you to choose. But it's a really cool way to kind of see how your build is doing. So there's leaderboards for the arena. There's no leaderboards, at least currently, for the Monolith of Fate. You can see that some of these people have pushed some pretty high waves in the arena, and in doing so, um, they get to test their build and see how good they're doing. Okay, that pretty much covers how the endgame systems work. So let's go on to the character sheet. This is where I guess you could say a lot of the magic happens in the game. This is where you do a lot of the determining how your build's going to work, or how well it's working, how effective it's being. So we're just going to go through this kind of line by line. Before I do so, though, I do want to say that what we're talking about here is truly an overview of these stats, these attributes. This stuff is really complex. I can and probably will do a whole video or series of videos just on how these work, because they are pretty complex. They're not Path of Exile level complex, but if you're coming from somewhere like Diablo 3 in particular, this may be a little more than what you're used to, or even a lot more than what you're used to. So use this as kind of like you're getting acclimated to how this stuff works. But once you get that and you start to get a feel for the game and you start playing the game, I definitely, if you're someone who wants to really, push a character and get really powerful, make a really good build, definitely want to learn these attributes a little bit better than just a base understanding. But this will at least get you started. Okay, let's start with the top ones here. So these are kind of like your main attributes. You've got your strength, your dexterity, your intelligence, your attunement, and your vitality. These work a little bit different than in some games. So they actually tell you that one of the great things about this game is these tooltips are usually really helpful. You can see the tooltips every time I go over stuff here. They're really helpful. Definitely read up on those if you're not sure how something's working. But for example, your strength. Each point of strength increases armor by 5% and improves skills that rely on the raw strength of you and your companions. So, what does that mean? And there's other ones here like that too. Like this says, dexterity improves skills that rely on the skillful handling of weapons. All right, so how do you know what skills do that? Well, that's actually really easy. So you go down here to your skills, and you hover over this, and it tells you in the blue. If you look at the blue there, towards the bottom, it says that Shield Rush, this particular skill I'm using, relies on physical, melee, and strength. And if you remember, we looked at strength up here as in one of the attributes. You got strength, dexterity, intelligence, attunement, vitality. So pretty much every skill is going to use at least one of those, and it's going to be modified by that. So Shield Rush is modified by it, and if you click Alt for more information, you can actually see what strength is doing to it. So in this case, for every point of strength we have, it increases the damage that Shield Rush does by 4%. So that's how you can see what your stats are doing, and in particular what these base attributes are going to be most beneficial to you. So there's really two things to look at with these. So what kind of defensive abilities is it providing? So this one's providing armor, and then what skills is it modifying? Let's move on. These ones are pretty easy. You get health, your mana, your health regen, your mana regen, your movement speed. Those are all pretty self-explanatory. Health, how much damage can you take before you die? Mana, how many abilities can you cast before you run out and can no longer cast and have to wait for your regen? Health regen, how much of your health you're going to get back per second. And then mana regen is the same thing, but just for mana. And movement speed is how fast your character is going to move. So those are easy. Let's move on to the protections, the defenses, which are not necessarily as easy as they might seem. All right, armor, pretty simple. It's going to protect you against your physical damage. This is the base amount of armor you have. So this character has 1516. It's getting that from multiple sources. For example, from the gear. There's armor on this gear. Could also get it from the passive skill tree. Can also get it from buffs that are put on from, like, say, Holy Aura. And then once you have this number, the game will actually calculate for you the percentage of incoming physical damage that you will avoid, so to speak, per hit. Now that number, that calculation is a little complex. It's not too complex, but it's based upon your character's level. It's based upon how much armor you have. And it's also, interesting enough, based upon how much health you have. The more health you have, the lower this number is. That sounds kind of weird. That's just how the game works. And that's also true for all these other protections. All of them are affected by how much health you have. The more you have, the more protection you need to get to the same percentage. And they're also affected by the level of your character. Okay, so lightning, cold, fire are pretty self-explanatory. Any lightning, cold, or fire damage coming in, you have protections against that. This character's got 19% for all of those. Void, necrotic, and poison are additional damage types that are in this game. Poison, most people are probably used to. Void, necrotic, maybe not as much, but they're really just, they're like the other ones. All right, that's protections. That's armor. Let's go to additional defenses, because this can also get pretty complex. Block chance. Block chance is the chance that you're going to actually block a hit from an attack or spell. So that's important to know. What that means is that block can stop any incoming attack or spell. You know, in some games, block only affects, say, physical hits. In this game, it affects basically every hit. So if the hit is a fireball from an enemy, it can block. The hit's, you know, a mace attack from an enemy or some sort of melee attack, it can block it. It can block everything but dots. So damage over time abilities is the only thing that can't be blocked. And you're going to notice that there is a trend that these four are not going to affect dots. So you need to keep that in mind, and we'll see. Well, I'll talk a little bit how that synergizes here at the end. All right. So block chance, how likely you are on any particular hit, except for dots, that you will block some of the damage that's coming in. And how much the damage that you will block is determined by two different things. So it's determined by your block protection. Well, I should say it's determined by three different things. So you can read here. When you block a hit, your block armor and block elemental protections are added to your armor and elemental protections. So it's actually, this stuff is going to play a factor, but that's going to play a factor anyway. This is just thrown into it on top. Block protection is added to your armor and protections for hits. So every time you block, the block protection is added. So like you have 15, 16. Let's say it's a physical attack. 15, 16 plus 15, 80 is the total amount of protection you'll have on that attack. If it's a lightning attack you block, it'll be 135 plus 15, 80 if you're this particular character. But there's also one more stat related to block that we need to talk about that doesn't show up on additional defenses, and that is block armor, which shows up on some items. I believe it's only shields. So in this particular case, this unique shield, and it doesn't only apply to unique shields, but this one has 586 block protection and 586 block armor. So block protection works as discussed. Block armor only adds to your armor when you block, which gives you this weird kind of, I guess you say, calculation to where if you have a shield like this with both block protection and block armor, when you block, you'll add your, and let's say you block a physical attack in particular, when you block that attack, your block protection will be added to your armor, and the block armor will also be added to the armor, so you'll add both to it. It only applies to armor. Block armor doesn't apply to anything else. Okay. Dodge. Now, dodge is a pretty cool one. Pretty interesting. So, you know, block chance, when you block, you'll add the block protection to whatever armor and protection the hit would be coming from, and so you'll take less damage. Dodge, if dodge goes off, you don't take any damage from it. So it's a complete miss of that attack from the enemy. And keep in mind, like block chance, the dots don't affect this. So dodge will not help you at all against dot attacks. But against regular attacks, this can be pretty powerful. Glancing blow is an interesting one as well. In glancing blow, when you take a glancing blow, you take only half the damage. Now, you might be thinking, as I did when I first saw this, well, wait a second. If I dodge an attack, I take no damage. If I take a glancing blow, I take half damage. So why would I ever want glancing blow if I can just take no damage? Well, the reason is, as you can see in my character here, who's a fairly advanced character, he's level 85, I got 100% glancing blow, and I got only 58% dodge. So the way the game works right now, glancing blow is relatively easy to get to 100%. Dodge, however, is not. In fact, I don't know if you even can get there. Maybe perfect rolls, maybe. I haven't seen anyone do that yet. So a good rule of thumb is if you want dodge or you want block, you also probably want glancing blow, because some of those attacks are going to go through. Better to take only half the damage on those than to take all. So that's why I in particular like glancing blow so much, and that's how glancing blow kind of synergizes with those two. All right, the last two on here. Stun avoidance. So stun works a little differently in this game than others as well. Maybe a little bit closer to Path of Exile. Um, in that, how likely you are to get stunned is determined by how hard you were hit and the amount of maximum health you have plus stun avoidance. So, if an enemy hits you particularly hard and you have low health and low stun avoidance, you are very likely to get stunned. If, on the other hand, they don't hit you very hard, let's say you have lots of protections, and you have high health and high stun avoidance, you're very unlikely to get stunned. In fact, the calculation is such that you can guarantee you won't get stunned from an attack. It's not like a random thing. So stun avoidance is a way to further increase your likelihood of getting stunned. It's not the only way, though. As this shows, you can either just take less damage from hits by working on your armor and protections, or your block chance, or your dodge, not get hit at all, or your glancing blow is obviously a really effective one. Or you can increase your maximum health. Now you can also increase your ward. Ward's about to be talked about. It also now is factored in the calculation. It used to not be, but that has recently changed. So if you have high ward, that also it contributes to as if it was part of your health pool. So high ward or high health, or some combination of the two, is good for against stuns. Stun avoidance is good against stuns. Not getting hit hard is good against stuns. That's basically how stuns work in this game. That's what stun avoidance, what role it plays in the game. All right, so let's talk about ward. So ward's really another amongst the interesting attributes or mechanics in the game. Another interesting one. So if you've played Path of Exile, you know there's I think it's called shield or energy shield, and it's this like blue thing that goes over your health bar. It's kind of like a crescent. The more you have, the more it goes across. Well, ward is kind of like that, but it's also in some really important ways very different. So you see this character's got quite a bit of ward, and in fact I can add more. In this case, by teleporting, I've added some ward. I'll show you how I did that in a second. But how ward works in this game is it is literally a shield over your health. And unlike Path of Exile, where your base energy shield, how it works is the most damage will be hit by your shield before it goes to your health, but there's some, I think it's chaos damage, that can go through your shield unless you have a particular passive skill point. This game, no damage goes through your ward, including dots. It has to deplete your ward before it hits your health. So that makes, in my opinion, ward, at least at the base level, before you create a crazy character in Path of Exile that doesn't happen to, makes ward way more valuable as an option than it would be in Path of Exile or games that have a mechanic where you can get through your shield as an enemy. Because if there's enemies that can get through your shield, it's like, okay, well, then there's lots of times where that shield is kind of useless. And so trying to stack shield would be potentially a bad thing in those particular encounters. Well, this game doesn't have that problem because everything's got to go through your ward. So ward is this over shield, and there's two other distinct mechanics that it has. One is that it depletes over time. So this character, it's not happening. It's because I'm wearing this unique that continuously regenerates it. But watch what happens when I take this off. When I take it off, you see that my ward is now depleting over time. My health's going up too, and that's another effect of this unique here. But the big thing is that ward can be lost. Now I can regen it, teleport, get some back, teleport, get some back, but it keeps going down. So it depletes both by getting hit, but also on its own naturally, assuming you don't have Exsanguinous. So the other thing about it is that it doesn't, since it depletes naturally, it's not regenning naturally, so you have to find other ways of getting it. One of them is through Exsanguinous. Again, this unique, and the other one, in this particular case, there's multiple ways of doing it. Different builds, different classes have different ways of doing it. But another way is through your skills. In this particular one is teleport. You can also increase the amount you can get and decrease the decay. It's called decay when it depletes through the passive skill tree. So if I type in ward here, I'll find that this one, for example, this node here, lost knowledge, you gain 7 ward per allocated point when you use a skill that costs more than 40 mana. So passive skill tree can offer you particular ways of getting ward. Skill trees themselves can offer you particular ways. So Ether Berry here, you gain 35 ward when you teleport. And this one here is one of my favorites. Convert 9% per point of your current health to ward at twice its value. So when I use teleport, I get these. I get 35 ward. I get 9% per point current health towards ward at its value. So that's why you see when every time I teleport, I'm gaining a decent amount of ward here. I gain about 100 right there. Some other things to consider, though, is I've talked about how it decays. Well, there's a stat that we were seeing here in this events is called ward retention. And what ward retention does is it decreases the decay of ward. So it slows down that decay. Okay, so that is really ward in a nutshell. That is what ward does. It's a shield that is kind of like an alternative to building up high health or high regen health or whatever it might be. It's one of the other options that you can use to like make your character more tanky. All right, last thing we want to talk about are these stats down here. We're just going to run through these kind of real quickly because these are pretty self-explanatory. And if you don't really understand what they do, you just go over the tooltip and it'll pretty much tell you. These are most of the stats that you'll find in the game. So for example, if you want to know what's your bleed chances, you go over here and it tells you this character doesn't bleed anything, so its bleed chance is 0. But if it did bleed, it'd have 63 damage. That's pretty much how all this stuff works. My character's 20% chance to ignite. When it does ignite, it does 147 damage over its 3-second duration. These can stack, by the way, so you can put multiple stacks of ignite on. But anyway, that's really how these stats work. They're pretty self-explanatory, or at least they seem to be on the face of it. Now, there are some problems with the game currently as the stats are implemented, in that a lot of skills modify stats, and sometimes they show up in here and sometimes they don't. So let's see for an example. When I use Fire Shield, I'm going to gain 25 additional elemental protection. So let's go in here, and we can actually, this will actually be up here. We'll see this. So let me turn on Fire Shield and watch my elemental protections. They went up over here. All right, so that's good, right? So you can see that your stats are going up there. It's not always the case, though. This is a particular problem for your damaging abilities, where, for example, Skira's Gambit on your Fireball is going to add 6% base critical strike chance. The problem is it's only going to add 6% base critical strike chance to the Fireball. But these stats are global. So if I look at my critical strike chance, it's never going to show, even if I'm tossing a bunch of fireballs. Look, my critical strike chance ain't changing, because that's a global stat, and you're not gonna get any change on it just by throwing fireballs. You're gonna have a global change to show anything on the stats. So keep that in mind when you're making your builds. If you see critical strike chance on your fireball or whatever build you have, you're not going to see it in here. So whatever these calculations are, you kind of have to mentally just add whatever you're throwing in on your skill tree to what you're going to get as your ultimate output. You're not going to be able to see it here. Hopefully at some point they find a way to change that, or to add those stats in. I don't know how they're going to do it. Maybe throw it in the skill tree somewhere. Maybe when you load this up, you'll have something here which gives you some. I'm not sure how they do that. That's probably why it's not done yet. It's kind of a challenge to even think about how they would do it. But keep that in mind. That stat tree is only going to help you with your global, universal stats. Any modifiers on particular skills is not going to be affected. And that'll wrap up part 2 of this Beginner's Guide to Last Epoch. Part 3 will cover gear itemization and the crafting system. I hope this guide has been helpful for you so far. If so, please drop it a like. Also, if you'd like to see future Last Epoch content on this channel, please also give me a subscribe. I'm also on Twitch 6 days a week, so would love to have you hop in, chat, hang out there as well. Hope to see you again real soon. Have a great time in Last Epoch.